After being delayed multiple times, Wonder Woman 1984 was finally released in theaters and on HBO Max on Christmas Day. And Brienne and I are filming the day after Christmas, but as you can see, we're still festive in the Christmas spirit. Because we actually watched Wonder Woman 1984 yesterday. But by the time we finished the movie, it was so late, we didn't want to go film a video, so we got back together today to film this bad boy. So what we're going to do, a brief overview, we're going to tell you our general thoughts about the movie, then we're going to break down what we liked, what we didn't like. I will warn you, there's going to be some spoilers. So, first and foremost, what did you think about Wonder Woman 1984?
Yeah, overall I thought it was a pretty good movie. Compared to the first one, most people know that I've not seen like other superhero movies, but before going into like watching all these superhero movies, the only one that I had seen was Wonder Woman, and I actually saw it twice in theaters, so brownie points for me.
Yeah.
But compared to that one, I think I liked the first Wonder Woman better. But this one was still a good movie. It was still good. Just wasn't as good, and I was a little confused on the plot most of the times. But it was okay. It was an okay movie.
Yeah, I thought it was really funny. Whenever I was even just getting to know you and stuff, whenever we were talking about different movies and stuff that you'd seen and how you'd never seen like any Marvel movies whatsoever or any DC movies except for Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
You'd seen like no superhero movies whatsoever, but you'd seen Wonder Woman twice in theaters. I just thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would agree. I think the movie was, in general, a decent movie. I think it was a fun movie to watch. But like you, I had concerns when it comes to actually understanding what was going on in the movie. And so we're probably going to spend a lot of time talking about those things in this review. But overall, I did enjoy it. It was a very colorful movie. I like movies that are set in the 80s. I like bright colors. I like stuff like that. It was a fun movie. I think it's a rewatchable movie. Actually, in many ways, I think that the new movie is more rewatchable than the original Wonder Woman.
I would agree.
Even though I would agree that the first Wonder Woman was a better movie.
Yes,
sometimes rewatchability isn't always a direct correlation to how good a movie is. Sometimes you like watching train wrecks happen, right? This isn't a train wreck by any means. I think it was a good movie. I just think it was not the strongest.
Yeah.
But that being said, let's actually go into the breaking down what we liked, what we didn't like. The first thing we both agreed on is that we both liked Maxwell Lord.
Yeah.
Right? So tell us, what did you think about Maxwell?
Yeah, I thought it was kind of weird that his character was highlighted so much because it is a Wonder Woman movie and her name is on the movie, but he seemed almost as if he was a main character. But his character development was kind of interesting. I thought it was really cool. So
yeah, in many ways it seemed more like the Maxwell Lord movie. As we were watching it yesterday, whenever, especially as it got into the third act of the movie and stuff, I was sitting there, I was like, I feel like this movie's more about Maxwell Lord, which I'm not complaining because I actually really liked how Pedro Pascal played the character. We haven't watched The Mandalorian yet. That'll be coming soon. After we finish the Marvel movies, I think I'm going to show her Star Wars because, fun fact, she hasn't really seen many Star Wars movies either. I think she's seen like 1.5 or something like that. So we'll watch Star Wars and eventually we'll get around to Mandalorian. So we haven't seen that. But everything I have seen Pedro Pascal in, I can say he's a pretty good actor. And this is also the case in this movie. He actually did a really good job. So there are things about his character that confused me.
Agreed.
But we'll get to those later on. Just as a character himself, I think the character was really fun, really entertaining, and also just really intriguing. I did like his character a whole lot in the movie.
Yeah.
And that really goes to another positive thing I had, which is something we already addressed a little bit, but I think it was a really enjoyable movie. I kind of lumped this together with The Amazing Spider-Man 2, which, once again, you have not seen. But a lot of people know that The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is a movie that a lot of people just didn't really care for. It's got, like, Electro and Green Goblin and all these different things, all these different villains lumped together and stuff, to where it kind of ended up being this mess, but it's also very bright and colorful and stuff. And a lot of people don't really like that movie, but for me, I actually enjoy the movie. And I think it's really rewatchable because it's just a fun movie. Like, it's just, I can sit down and just watch that movie at any point and just enjoy it, even though it's not exactly the best movie. And I would say that's very similar to Wonder Woman 1984, to where I could see myself sitting down, like, if it was on TV, I'd rewatch it. If I was just scrolling through HBO Max, I was like, oh, look, I'll rewatch that again. I think it was really enjoyable. I just don't think it's necessarily the best movie around, but it did have a lot of really fun moments and stuff like that. So I think that's another positive. Would you agree on that?
Yeah, I feel like as you watch that movie, the more times you watch it, the more things you're going to discover and the more pieces you're going to put together. So it's one of those movies, I think, that you don't get everything from the first time that you watch it, which I guess is kind of smart, like, from, like, a producer standpoint, is because, like, people are going to have to rewatch it over and over again to get things. So I guess that is kind of smart. But, yeah, that's the one cool thing about the movie. You could rewatch it, and there's going to be something new you discover each time. So,
yeah, and I also did like the themes in the movie. I mean, it's talking about, really, the whole movie's about greed and hedonism and the pursuit of pleasure. And Maxwell Lord's whole character, the reason why he's the main villain is that he wants to grant everybody their wishes.
Yes.
Ultimately to feed his own wish for power and like all these things. And he's got a backstory. And in many ways, I actually found him a more realistic and relatable character than some of the other characters we've talked about, other villains we talked about in past movies, like whenever we were watching Black Panther or when we're watching Infinity War, people like relating to Thanos and Killmonger. I don't really see the relatability to those people. I can see how Maxwell, or Max, we'll call him Max. I could see how Max ended up where he ended up at, because that is a very common thing you see, especially in America, in our culture. You see this like greed and this hunger, and everybody just wants the things that they desire. They want the things they desire, obviously. But I found that a very relatable thing, and I could see how he ended up there. And I did appreciate the themes of what they were going for and the message they were trying to send. I did think they got a little bit preachy with it at points, and believe me, I don't mind being preachy. If you've ever watched any of these videos, you know I'm the king of preachy. Like, I will just be talking about a movie and I'll just go into like a sermon. But in the movie, it just, there were times wherever like Wonder Woman would like start just going into this like monologue, and it would just kind of drag on, and I was like, okay, I feel like there's a more subtle way of putting this. Like, I don't disagree with the things you're saying, just I wasn't expecting this in the middle of the movie.
Right.
You know, it was almost like we were in an action movie, and then all of a sudden Shakespeare stepped in and just like threw in a little like, you know, monologue and or soliloquy, and one woman was like, oh, like, you know, all these different things. I was like, okay, I get the message. I agree with the message. It just sometimes that would take me out of it. But overall theme really good. I feel bad. Like, everything I'm saying is like, oh, I like this, but there was also this part I didn't like. I'm kind of spoiling the parts that we're going to get to later. But I did like the message. I thought that it was very nice, and even it's very good. It's a timely message for everything going on with the coronavirus pandemic and stuff, where I think a lot of times people are kind of realizing the things we took for granted, the things that sometimes we want but realize we don't need. And in a lot of ways, the virus has forced us to shift our priorities and figure out what we do truly need. And in some ways, people have failed to actually do that amidst all this. So I think there was a very good message there that they really didn't anticipate whenever they were filming this movie. But I think it worked out. Yeah, and then another thing I liked is the invisible jet. Once again, sorry. I thought it was kind of corny how they got there. Because she's like, oh, by the way, I actually have these magic powers where I can goop, boo, and turn something invisible. I was like,
that was never explained,
I mean, it does make sense because she tied it into how this is what Zeus did to turn Themyscira invisible, like the island that she was from. I was like, okay, so there is at least a precedence for this.
Right.
But I would have liked that being, like, established ahead of time. Like, just like, you know, just like little, like, just mention it. Oh, yeah, there's, like, this magic of, like, turning things invisible. Rather than, like, just throwing it in there. But I remember we were sitting there, and I was like, oh my gosh, are they about to do the invisible jet thing? And then they did. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Like, that was kind of like a little fun little Easter egg in a way. What did you think about that whole scene with them flying on the invisible jet?
Yeah. Is that something... Okay, question. Is that something, like, from the comics?
In the comics, she has an invisible jet. It's kind of a running joke. Like, with Aquaman, people always joke around how he talks to fish. With Wonder Woman, one of the running jokes is that she's got this invisible jet. So you'll see, like, memes with her, like, just, like, flying, like, just sitting in a jet, but, like, flying through the air.
Okay, got it.
So, yeah.
I didn't know, since it was so randomly thrown in, I didn't know if that was something for people that read the comics, because I've never read any, like, Wonder Woman comics. So I was like, oh, she has an invisible jet. Didn't know that was a thing, because I had seen the first one, and that was never, like, mentioned or in it, and so I was kind of confused by that. But if it's in the comics, then it makes sense. So yeah. Yeah,
and I've actually never read any Wonder Woman comics either. That's just something that I had just picked up from like pop culture stuff. Because, and really having not read any Wonder Woman comics, that might actually be the solution to some of the negatives I have, because there's a lot of things that go unexplained in this movie that might be explained in the comics.
Right.
But having not read the comics, I was just confused about a lot of stuff. And so, if that is the reason why, I mean, sure, I guess I could go read the comic, but having not read them, I'm going to judge the movie at face value, and I'm like, you should have explained that to me. But yeah, so the invisible jet, that is from the comic books, and so I liked how they did it. Like, I don't think it's the exact same way. I'm pretty sure the invisible jet was something that, like, it's one of her, like, things from Themyscira or something like that.
Oh, okay, got it.
I don't really know where it came into place. I don't think it was her just going like, boom, invisible.
Yeah.
But I thought it was like a cool way of just like them throwing it in there, because I remember when the first Wonder Woman movie came out, people were like, you think they're gonna do it? And it was always one of those corny things. Like, nah, they're never gonna pull that off. But they did, and so that was kind of cool. And speaking of that, I also did like the interaction once again with Steve and Diana. You know, just like because Steve comes back, and I did like they have really good chemistry together.
Yes,
and so I did enjoy that, even though once again there's very confusing aspects about that we will address. That's probably actually one of the most confusing aspects to me. But yeah, so it was good to see Steve back. Steve's a really good guy. He's kind of one-dimensional in a lot of ways because he's just such a good guy.
Right.
And I've seen a lot of people complaining about that. I don't really mind. I think he's pretty cool, and I can see a little bit of like him being such a good guy could kind of help explain why Diana got so fixated on him for like what, I guess 70 years, right? World War I to 1984. It's been like 70 years. She spent like a week with this guy, and she's still fixated on him 70 years later. He's got to be a pretty awesome guy. If you're going to justify that, okay, he's got to be pretty great. And then the last thing that I wanted to mention that I really liked, and I think that you liked this as well, was the Whitehouse scene. Because I remember that's the point in the movie where you actually looked at me, and I felt bad. As we were watching it, we were kind of criticizing a lot of it, not intentionally, because I think, just a face value here, I think the reason we were so disappointed by the movie is because we went in with really high expectations.
Agreed.
This was the one movie the one superhero movie she had seen before, and she saw it twice in theaters. That should let you know how much she liked Wonder Woman. I also really liked Wonder Woman, and I've missed not seeing new movies this year. And so I was really pumped going into this movie, and so whenever we finally sat down to watch it, I was expecting it to be really awesome, mainly because I'd heard reviews that said it was super awesome, and so it ultimately just kind of came out disappointing because I think my expectations were a little too high.
I would agree.
But at this point, whenever they had the whole Whitehouse scene and there was like fights there, this is when you turned to me and you're like, all right, this is good.
Right.
So tell us, what did you think about that scene?
Yeah, I really liked it. That's like he was saying, whenever I thought, okay, the movie's finally picking up. But then again, it was like an hour and a half into the movie, and I was like, why didn't they start this sooner? Because things were finally happening. There was actually action going on. You see characters clashing. There's conflict. And yeah, that's whenever I think the peak of the movie was. But for me, it was just a little too late into it. They would have started that a little sooner. I think they could have developed some things a little bit more. But yeah.
Yeah, that was really the point of the movie where you're like, things are really coming together to where it was still an enjoyable movie. I mean, I remember we were an hour into the movie and we had to pause it for something, and we were like, oh wow, we're already an hour in. Like, really, the time flew. So it is a really rewatchable movie. Even though it's 2.5 hours long, I would say it didn't feel that long.
Oh yeah, no.
It felt a lot shorter, which is a really good thing. Sometimes you watch a 2.5 hour movie and it feels like 5 hours. So this is a very good movie that, like, it's very, like, it just keeps going to where the time flies by. But it wasn't until they got to the White House and Max Lord is kind of just going insane. Like, his nose is bleeding and stuff. And he's, like, just kind of influencing the president. He's taking control over stuff.
So much going on.
And then Barbara shows up and they start fighting and Wonder Woman starts getting weak. And you're like, whoa. Like, all of a sudden you're like, okay, I'm kind of feeling this. This is cool.
Yeah.
Things are going on, and I did enjoy that scene. Like, that was really fun. But then after that, it kind of just went back downhill for me because I think I was just so confused. And so I think at this point, this is whenever we actually need to start turning to the negatives, which we've already kind of addressed here. But really, the biggest negative here of the whole movie is just the amount of confusion that we were experiencing while watching it.
Yeah.
Because there was a lot of stuff where I would pause the movie. Like that's the cool thing about being able to watch it on HBO Max, right? You can just stop it. You can pause the movie.
Talk
and
about
so,
it.
like, it was a 2.5 hour movie. We probably took 4 hours watching it because we just, like, paused it and we were, like, talk. And then also we had people over for Christmas, and so, like, you know, we'd interact and stuff. But we paused the movie and we were like, okay, do you get what's going on?
Yeah.
And a lot of the times we just didn't fully understand what was going on. You know, there was, like, really good ideas, but with, like, a poor execution, because it's almost like, even though it was 2.5 hours long, it could have benefited from being 30 minutes longer, just to, like, maybe add some exposition in there, which typically you don't like exposition dumps, but really the only exposition dump in the whole movie was whenever they went to find that one guy who explained what the stone was, and they were like, oh yeah, there's this god of lies, and he created it. And I was like, You're just gonna throw that in there?
Yeah.
So basically, there's like a third villain to the movie who never gets addressed. You know, because there's Maxwell Lord, there's the girl who becomes Cheetah, and then there's like this god of lies who apparently created the stone from the beginning, and Diana keeps being like, oh, he's like a terrible guy, he's like the worst, and then like, you're like, okay, so he created the stone, and then it just moves on. And that's basically the exposition dump we get.
Right.
But there were some really, really confusing points
Yeah.
to this movie, and so I just wanted to kind of address those. So first off, Max's powers. What did you think about Max's powers?
Yeah. I was kind of, once we got to the end, things kind of, like, explained themselves a little bit, but not really. I kind of understood what his powers were doing, but, like, not, or why they were doing it, but, like, what they were actually doing was confusing. So, like, I understood that it was, like, from greed, and he was trying to, like, grant everyone's wishes, but how they actually worked was confusing, because it seemed like granting wishes was weakening him, yet giving him power at the same time. So I was kind of confused as to, like, I don't know. It was just weird.
Yeah, it confused me because whenever you get the stone, you know, because basically the stone's the big MacGuffin of the movie, where that's what everybody's going after. And very quickly you learn that if people wish upon this stone, it grants that wish, which you kind of just have to roll with that, right? This is a comic book movie. Okay, sure, there's this magic stone that grants wishes. That's fine. And you realize, okay, that's the basic premise, that, you know, if you wish on it, grants that wish. And so you have Barbara wishing to be like Diana, and so she starts developing powers. And then you have Diana, who wishes to see Steve again, and so she gets that. And so, but at the same time, you learn later on that while it grants you your greatest wish, it also steals from you your greatest ability.
Right.
I guess so. That's why Diana begins to, she becomes weak, and that's why Barbara kind of stops being as nice and caring. And so, like, you have this, like, pro and con thing, but I was really confused once Max, like, he wished to become the stone, right? And so he now has the powers to grant these wishes. And I remember specifically whenever he was like going through like the office space and stuff, and he's trying to grant people wishes, like, you know, he's bringing people into his office like once at a time, and, you know, he's shaking their hands and doing stuff like that. And I was trying to figure out, okay, is granting wishes helping him or harming him?
Right.
Because it seemed like you said, it was giving him power, but at the same time it was having this severe toll on his body.
Yeah.
And so I was like, wait. I couldn't tell, like obviously he seemed to think that the more wishes he could grant, the more powerful he'd become. But at the same time, the more wishes he granted, the more weak he became.
Right.
And so I couldn't tell, was it like the toll on his body was coming from like the disparity between him granting the wishes, like he just had to constantly be granting them in order to feel powerful.
Yeah.
So like that's what I'm assuming, because that's ultimately where the story led, to where, you know, he ends up being like, you know, on the TV screens everywhere.
One is doing it at once.
Yeah, so that's what I'm assuming. They just didn't really explain it well.
Yeah.
To where the only reason I could put that all together is because of where the movie ended up. And so finally I'm like, oh, okay. I finally get where he's coming from.
Right.
Whereas the whole journey there, I was like, I don't get how these powers work.
Yeah, because as he's granting wishes, like, his nose starts bleeding. Then he grants another one, his ear starts bleeding. And so it's like, okay. Then he goes and, like, takes vitamins. And you're like, okay, so he's trying to, like, get himself back in good health. And then he grants more wishes and he hurts himself. So it's really confusing. Yeah.
And then I just had practical questions about, like, this whole wish thing. I mean, I know that we're probably overanalyzing this for a comic book movie. Since this is a movie back in 1984, maybe we're supposed to treat it like a movie made back in 1984. And if you go watch comic book movies from back then, they didn't offer any explanations. You just kind of went with it.
Yeah.
But we have so many comic book movies at this point that I think you kind of have to treat, even, you can't treat us like a 1984 audience. You got to treat it like a 2020 audience.
Right.
And we have questions about these things. And so I was just thinking, what's the practicality of this? What if two people's chief wishes are entirely contradictory?
Yeah.
Right? What if there's an American who's like, I hope that the stock market booms and I make a bunch of money, but then there's like a guy overseas who says, like, I hope that the American stock market crashes.
Yeah.
Right? Like, which would happen.
Right.
I mean, I know that's just, I'm just trying to figure out, how do you grant both of those wishes?
Right.
Would one take precedence over the other? Like, I just,
yeah.
this, like, I'm watching this movie and I'm trying to focus on the movie, but I'm just thinking practically, like, how does this work?
Right.
Like this one lady, like she was arguing with her husband, and she says like, I hope that you and all your Irish guys, like they get taken away. And he says, I hope you drop dead. And then she drops dead. It's like, okay, well, what if her greatest wish was actually, I hope I don't drop dead? Because, I mean, if I heard that, I'd say, you know what, I revoke my previous wish. I wish to stay alive. Obviously, you probably don't have time to do this, but I'm just like thinking like, I don't know how it practically works to where you can't grant everybody's wishes. And ultimately, I guess that is what you see.
Correct.
Because that's why chaos ensues. He's trying to grant everybody's wishes, and basically the world just turns into turmoil.
Right.
Because people's wishes contradict, and you can't always get what you want.
Right.
Which, once again, ties back to the overall theme of the movie, which I think is really good. Right? It's saying, you know what?
I think it's applicable.
All the things you want aren't necessarily the things you need. And even if you would benefit from those things, it doesn't mean the world would benefit. That's what Diana has to learn, right? She wants desperately to be with Steve Trevor, but ultimately she realizes that if she does that, she has to give up her powers, and really she's there to save people. And so she would actually lose the ability to save people. And so she's like, okay, well, I have to give up Steve in order to protect people. And so you realize, okay, well, sometimes in order to get what you desire, you have to give up something, which can tie back to the opening scene at Themyscira, right, where she's having to cheat and stuff like that, and they say no cheating. Right. Really, up in most of the movie, I was trying to figure out how that even tied in to anything. Yeah. But I guess that's vaguely what they're going for, right? It's like, okay, no cheating. You can't just cheat your way to the top. And so, like in that scene, like the opening scene at Themyscira, I was really confused because during the scene, I didn't think that she was cheating. I thought she was just being smart.
Yeah.
You know, I was like, oh, look at her. She's like sliding down the thing. And then I was like, oh, wow, nice. Good comeback.
Yeah.
But then they're like, you can't cheat. I was like, oh, I guess that was not allowed. And so I didn't really pick up on that. But ultimately, I guess that was the theme. You can't cheat your way to the top. That's what Max Lord was trying to do. And that's what a lot of them were trying to do. Ultimately, can't do it. I was just confused about his powers. And then I was also confused about the lasso's power. Because the lasso of truth, right? There's a lot of things that seems like they just threw it in there for the sake of plot convenience.
Correct.
Because in the previous movie, it was established that, you know, like the lasso, like if it like wrapped around you, also shout out to this awesome jacket. Look at that, Wonder Woman. All right, I'm wearing my Superman one, but they kind of match, so it's kind of cool. But the lasso, like if it like wraps around you, it like causes you to tell the truth.
Right.
But in this one, it's just this crazy device that if it wraps around you, it can like show you the truth.
Yeah, you can see it.
Yeah, it's like a history lesson almost. Like you can see it, and that becomes a big plot device later. So I do like how they subtly just like they did mention it a little bit earlier in the movie, so that it had the payoff at the end. But even at that point, I was still like, I'm still confused as to why. Like, why is it like this? Seems like this would be a big deal. Yeah. Like if this thing can reveal truth to people, like why aren't you constantly using this on everybody? You know, like just go find a bad guy, use it on them, and like show them the error in their ways, and like I feel like there's just so many possibilities. So you've just introduced this very powerful object, which it was already pretty powerful because it can get you to tell the truth. But if it can show you the truth, which I don't even really know what that means. In the sense of, like, is it like talking about like biblically, like when Jesus, like, if you abide in my word, you'll be my disciples, you'll know the truth. I don't really know what it means by that. It's like this abstract concept of truth, which, I mean, maybe it's just my Christian bias, but I don't fully understand how to define objective truth aside from like God. Right. And in a world where there's like multiple gods, I don't know. So it just kind of confused me. Once again, just me analyzing all this stuff. The lasso confused me. And also that thing, it would just change lengths. And it would also latch onto clouds and lightning. I was about to say, it literally would latch onto nothing in the air. It was just like air, and she would like sling towards it, and she'd like throw it in the other direction, and she'd be like air, grabs onto it, goes in that direction. I was like, that's weird. Yeah, and then that brings us to another thing that really confused me. Really, like I said, most of these things that we have issues with, it's just us being confused while watching the movie, which really, unfortunately, as enjoyable as the movie was, it just took us out of the movie. Right. To where we're watching it, we're wanting to enjoy it, but I'm just trying to figure out what the heck's going on. And that would bring me to Steve Trevor. Because, obviously, in the movie, Steve Trevor comes back, but it's like his soul is in the body of another man. Right, but we see him throughout the movie. We don't see the other person. Yeah, and so we see him, and throughout the movie, we're just talking to each other, and we're saying, okay, so what does Diana see? Right. Because there's one point where I just thought that maybe the guy morphed into Steve at the beginning. Yes. But then later on, he's looking into a mirror, and he sees the original guy. Yeah. And then Diana says, all I see is you, Steve. And I was like, okay, does she like physically see Steve Trevor before her?
Yeah.
Or does she physically see this other guy and just know that Steve's soul is inside of him?
Right.
Like, I didn't know if they were showing us Steve for the sake of us, the audience, so that we could see Chris Pine and know what was going on and not be confused, or if they were doing it because that's what she actually saw.
Right.
And it was just confusing the heck out of me, because then I'm also once again practically thinking, okay, what happened to this, like the actual dude?
Yeah.
You know, Steve woke up in this dude's body. He's there for like, I don't know, a week, however long it is. And then this other guy, well, you see him at the end of the movie, he shows up there, and that's really awkward, because this guy shows up and he's wearing literally the outfit that she had suggested for Steve earlier on, and Steve had turned down. And then this guy shows up at the end of the movie, and he's like, oh yeah, like, I know a lot of people don't like this outfit. She's like, I think it's pretty cool. And I'm just uncomfortable here, because I'm remembering how her and Steve slept together earlier in the movie. And I'm like, she slept with this dude, and he doesn't even know about it.
Yeah.
Like, he was, like, unconscious for a week? Or, like where was his soul at? Where was his mind? I don't know. I was just very uncomfortable, very confused at that final scene, because I was like, I don't know how the Steve Trevor thing worked.
Yeah.
I was really glad that they brought him back. I liked how they did it. I was just really confused. I was like, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, and I'm also thinking, just from her perspective, if she's looking at a different guy but knows that Steve's like soul or whatever is inside of him, like, that would be kind of awkward for her to like look at somebody else and be like, yes, this is the person I'm in love with, but I'm not actually looking at you. Like, that, I feel like that would be very weird for her.
Yeah, well, and it's just, she processed it so quickly.
Yeah.
He follows her, like, they're at the Smithsonian, like, gala thing, and he's like, Diana. She's like, you don't even know who I am. And then he's like, he puts the watch in her hand, like, says the last thing he said to her in the first movie, and she's like, Steve. And I was like, wow, you processed that so quickly.
Yeah.
Like, she processed it before even, like, I mean, I knew what was happening, but the only reason I knew what was happening is because I had seen the trailer for the movie.
Right.
Like, if I hadn't known Steve was coming back, I was just really confused. Like, even whenever the guy was following her, I didn't know what was going on. And then once he, like, put the watch, I was like, oh, this is Steve. Okay, cool. But then it panned around, and she saw him, and I was like, wait. So, what is she seeing right now? I was just really confused. And, I don't know. That just might be on us. Maybe we're just dumb. But I think it was just very confusing how it was portrayed, and I just think it raised a lot of really interesting questions.
Right.
And then I just felt really concerned whenever they brought that guy back later on, at literally the closing scene of the movie, which is randomly set at Christmas time.
Yeah.
Like, it was like the whole movie was set in, like, July, because there literally was 4th of July fireworks. And then all of a sudden it's, like, 6 months later, and I don't know. I was just confused. That guy, like, walks up, and I'm like, you don't even know that y'all have, like, slept in the same bed together. That's disturbing. I don't know. It was just kind of creepy to me. I was probably overanalyzing all of it. And another thing I was confused about was the golden armor. Because they did explain it, right? Because Steve is kind of with Diana in, I guess, her Wonder Woman lair. She's got, like, a little, like, computer screen laptop. So he's like, what's that leaning against the wall? And she's like, oh, nothing. That's just, like, invincible armor that was created so that people could, like, no man could ever defeat this person. And you're like, what?
Yeah.
Like they do explain it so that you know that she has it when it comes in later. But I was just confused. I was like, well, I want to know the story of how you got your hands on that. Yeah. Like, where'd that come from? Because I guess, ultimately, this is the armor of who turns out to be Linda Carter in the mid-credit scene. Right? Linda Carter, the original Wonder Woman from the TV show. So it's her armor, but I'm just confused. I'm like, where'd you get that armor at?
Yeah, they explained the origin of where it came from, but not how she got it. Yeah. You know?
Yeah, like that was the thing that just confused me. I was like, so where did you get that? Because you've told me how it came to be. You told me whose it was. I just don't know why it's in your closet.
Yeah, I guess the only thing that I could think was maybe because she was an elite girl over in her area or her land. I forgot the name of it. But maybe it was, like, passed down to her and given to her, and that maybe it's through, like, bloodline somehow. And since she was the most elite, most powerful, they gave it to her. That'd be my only... Well,
the thing that confuses me there is because maybe I just haven't watched the first Wonder Woman in a while, but she's not allowed to return to Themyscira, right? Wasn't it like once you leave, you can't come back? And so she didn't leave with that armor.
It's true.
You know? And I mean, it was showing in the opening scene whenever they're there and she's training, that statue that rises up, I'm pretty sure it's based off of the girl with that armor.
Right.
But whenever she left the island in the first movie, she did not have that armor. And so I'm just like, Yeah, and like, why don't you wear this later on? You know, you got like Batman versus Superman, you got Justice League. Where's this armor at? And then Cheetah, she's just like ripping it apart.
Oh, yeah,
I was like,
part...
I thought the armor was supposed to be invincible.
Yeah, that part really annoyed me because they showed a whole scene where this entire army of people with like swords and all this type of stuff is coming to attack the person who has the golden armor on.
Mm-hmm.
And it's literally just her by herself in the golden armor and this whole army of people. And then we're going to have this fight with her and Barbara. That's her name, right?
Yeah, Barbara.
Yeah, her and Barbara. And she's just going to immediately, like 5 seconds into it, just like rip the wings apart. I was like, really? Is that practical? We just had an entire army of people come and it was invincible and didn't get to her. But now this one person's going to come over here and completely tear it apart.
Yeah.
And she's just using her hands. Yeah, no.
Mm-hmm. And now that you brought up Barbara, that leads me to the final thing that really confused me.
Yeah.
Why the heck did Barbara become a cheetah?
I was literally telling that to you also.
Yeah.
Because they weren't, it'd be different if you were in an area where a cheetah maybe would make sense. Maybe we're in a tropical area or like a jungle or something. But no, we're in the middle of Washington, D.C. So that doesn't really make sense why there's a cheetah, but...
Yeah, because going into the movie, I knew, I'd done my research. I knew that Barbara was going to eventually become Cheetah, and I'm pretty sure they even included it in one of the trailers stuff. So I knew that. And they even included it, right, where originally she wanted to be like Diana, and then later on she says, hey, I want to change my wish, which I didn't know you could do. But she's like, hey, I want to change my wish. I don't want to be like Diana anymore. I guess she revoked it and then took on another wish. That seems convenient. Like, just do that constantly, and you can just, like, experience all the different wishes you had. But she's, like, in the plane with Max, and she says, I changed my wish. I don't want to be like Diana. I want to be my own person. I want to be, like, an apex predator.
Yeah.
And so, basically, that's just them saying, like, oh, she's going to become a cheetah. But I'm like, is that what she meant?
Yeah.
Like, did she, whenever she said, I want to be an apex predator, first off, that seemed random, because she studies, like, gems. She doesn't study animals. So why, like, it just seemed like a really random inclusion there. She's like, I just want to be an apex predator. You're like, okay, that's cool, I guess.
Yeah.
But then you're just like, I don't think that's what she meant. I don't think whenever she made that wish, she had in her mind, I hope that I turn into a weird-looking human hybrid cheetah.
Yeah.
I don't think that's what she meant. I think she meant she wants to be like top dog or something,
Right.
And like when I say top dog, I don't mean a little dog, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that was understood. So I guess Max is now turning into a genie, where like he hears your wish and he like gives you a little twist. I don't know. It just seemed really weird because she just shows up. And I knew she was going to become Cheetah by the end of the movie.
Yeah.
I just didn't know why she was a cheetah. I was like, what the heck? What?
Yeah. I remember seeing it in the trailer, and I was like, oh, that'll be interesting to see why she's like that. Maybe it will explain it.
Yeah.
It didn't really.
No,
it
did not explain it at all. And so then they fight, and that was also a weird thing because it was just like a really brief fight. It was at the night, and it just ends. And then I guess at the end of the movie, she reverts back to a human. And I'm pretty sure, once again, I haven't read the comics, but I'm pretty sure Cheetah is like Wonder Woman's top enemy, like number one villain.
Yeah.
Kind of like Joker to Batman, Lex Luthor to Superman, right? But for some reason, I guess Cheetah was like the secondary villain in this movie, and it was just kind of odd.
Yeah.
So the big things that we have issues with, and the reason why I say we is because throughout the whole movie, it was both of us trying to process this. Literally, right before we filmed this video, I went and rewatched the last, 15 minutes of the movie just to see if I could make better sense of it. Once again, a cool thing about having it on HBO Max, you can just, rewind, fast forward, pause, do all that stuff. And so, it still just didn't make sense to me. Like really, the number one thing that I have against this movie is that I was just confused the whole time. And, you've got to extend your, you need to be able to just kind of roll with movies like this, because, we're dealing with, very fantastical beings who, have these superpowers. And I can extend my disbelief so far, and I can just kind of roll with it. But in this movie, it just kept taking me out because I didn't know what was going on. I want to at least be able to follow the plot and know what's going on. I had no idea.
Yeah.
I knew that Max wanted to make people's wishes come true, but then all of a sudden, I thought his whole thing was he just wanted to sell a bunch of oil, But then all of a sudden, that's what I thought. Whenever he was tracking down the stone, I thought he was just going to say, I wish that all the places where I bought would, they would have a bunch of oil, and I'd become rich. And I was like, okay, there you go. And then he's like, I want to become the stone. I was like,
that's
I don't even know how that works. What do you mean you want to become the stone? There's a lot of variables there, man.
Yeah.
And I could tell, as soon as it happened, whenever it was, disintegrating and consuming him or whatever, I was like, dude, this isn't going to go very good for your health. And I don't know. I was very confused at what was going on.
Yeah.
And then, so those are all the things that confused us, and I think that is our number one thing we have against the movie. It was just very, very confusing.
Yeah.
But then another thing was just the CGI. So tell us about the CGI, Brienne.
Yeah, it started really just from the first opening scene when they're having that race. Just the way that they're flipping from certain contraptions and flying in the air and all that kind of stuff. You can obviously, even the way they run, you can obviously tell that it's very CGI. And I know we talked about in Black Panther how the CGI was like kind of weird in that one, but I honestly think that Wonder Woman, like the CGI was worse in this one than it was in Black Panther. It was a little better in Black Panther than it was in this one.
Well, and I think it's because there were more shots that required CGI in this one, right? Because in Black Panther, there's certain key moments where you're like, oh wow, that's pretty bad CGI. But in this one, it's like literally the opening scene, like they're just like swinging around, and I'm like, it's a cartoon. That's just like an animated image right there. And once again, if this was a movie made in 1984, this would be groundbreaking stuff. Heck, if this was a movie made 10 years ago, this would be groundbreaking stuff.
Yes.
But I've seen movies that have been made even by DC, right? So I know Warner Brothers has the ability to do better CGI, and I know they have the budget because this is like a huge movie. And they had so much extra time, right? I mean, this movie has been delayed and delayed and delayed. I was like, you're telling me that they couldn't like, I'm like, because once it like literally first scene of the movie, I'm like already taken out of it because I'm like, this is, you know, like when you watch a movie, you're kind of wanting to just like jump into the story and imagine like this is the real world. But from the first scene, I'm like, this isn't the real world. Yeah. That's a cartoon. Yeah. Right. And throughout the whole movie, like there's at one point whenever they were in Cairo. And she's like, this is whenever Diana discovers she's weak because she's like fighting with the tanks and stuff, and she starts like running, right? She's like, her and Steve are driving in the car, and then she just like hops out of the car, which actually was a pretty slick move. Like, she's like opened the door and then like just immediately started running. It reminded me of Captain America in Civil War.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
You remember that? Yeah. Whenever they're like chasing after Black Panther and stuff, and then like Cap's like, same thing with Wonder Woman here. It's actually really cool. But then literally the next cut is her running, and you can tell that her legs weren't even moving. It's literally just her
arms, her upper body.
Yeah, she's just like, and maybe that's just cause I'm a runner. Yeah. Like I was watching this, I was like, that's not running. So I just tend to be very critical of running in any movie because I can usually tell. I'm like, okay, guys, like. The Flash in Justice League. You haven't seen Justice League. Yeah. I'm actually avoiding showing her Justice League because I want her to see the Snyder cut without having seen the Whedon cut. So that's exciting. But whenever you watch The Flash in Justice League, Ezra Miller's running form is so weird. And I'm like, dude, like you're literally your character, like his main thing is running. Like, go see a running coach. Do something. Like, that is weird running form. And it's always funny to me watching, like, celebrities run because you can tell they just don't do it. And, like, they'll be like, oh, yeah, I just finished, like, a half marathon. I'm like, you did not run 13 miles like that. But with this, Wonder Woman, I will say this, Gal Gadot, she has pretty good running form whenever it, like, shows her, like, running, like, at the end, like, after she kisses Steve Trevor and then, like, leaves, like, first off, she's hauling. She's like,
she's moving.
But it's really good running form. And then she, like, leaps into the air. You're like, whoa, this is cool. But even then, we go back to the CGI. Yeah. It's really weird. Like every time she has the lasso and stuff, you can tell that it's all CG because even how she slides across the floor, it's not a natural way to slide across the floor. Like, I know they're trying to make it seem like she's like slick, but she's got like this like armor with like ridges on. Yeah. Like, if you're sliding across the floor, you're gonna be scraping on that floor. It's gonna be like bouncy, like it's gonna be weird. But she's just like, and like the opening scene at the mall, really cool scene, but it kept taking me out of the movie because of how fluid it all was. I was like, this is just all animated, you know, like it didn't feel like she was actually interacting with an environment around her. It was like she was just floating around in space and things were moving like in the background. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I was gonna say the CGI seems like anytime they were like in the air or they were transitioning from one place to the next, they looked like they were almost like gliding in a way. And it like how you're saying was like super smooth, and it seemed like for half a second they would go like in slow motion and then it would go back to normal, and then it'd be like slow motion as they transition again and then back to normal. So yeah. Yeah,
it just kept taking me out of the movie, and I felt bad because once again I really wanted to like this movie a whole lot more, and I did like the movie. Like, I will probably rewatch this more than I will rewatch the original Wonder Woman, even though I think the original Wonder Woman was a better movie. Yes. I really enjoyed this movie, and I think I might enjoy it more rewatching it because now I'll be going into it with the right mindset and the right expectations. It just kept taking me out of it because I was like, wow, that's very cartoony. And it could just be like that might possibly be just a directorial choice because they're like, ooh, like let's make this as if it was a movie that could come out in the 80s. But I heavily doubt that.
Yeah.
I think I'm just trying to like justify like the decisions that were made.
Mm-hmm.
And then just one more negative thing I had against it, and it's really not a negative thing, it's just, once again, me just speculating and just being confused. It has to do with like the continuity of these DC movies.
Mm-hmm.
Because basically, I know that they're kind of doing their whole multiverse thing right now, so they're kind of trying to make each movie independent from one another.
Mm-hmm.
But just practically thinking here, this movie is really the second movie that takes place in all the chronology of the DC movies so far, right? So you would have Wonder Woman 1984, Man of Steel, Batman vs. Superman, I guess like Suicide Squad and Justice League, right? I guess that would be like the chronology there.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just thinking about it, and going into Wonder Woman 1984, I was thinking this is going to have to be a pretty like lowbrow movie. Like not a whole lot can happen.
Right.
Because whenever you experience Wonder Woman in Batman vs. Superman, basically she's presented as having been like living under the radar ever since the end of Wonder Woman's movie, like the first movie.
Mm-hmm.
So I was thinking, okay, nothing major can happen here. Also because whenever Superman shows up in Man of Steel, he's presented as like the first superhero, right? Like this is like, oh, whoa, and Jonathan Kent's whole thing is like, Clark, like if people knew you existed,
mm-hmm.
they would like freak out and they're not ready.
Mm-hmm.
But you have Wonder Woman running around like decades earlier, and so like, would Superman really be that crazy to them?
Right.
Because Wonder Woman's going around, she's like swinging on her lasso, she's like doing all these crazy things. So going into the movie, I was expecting it to be very like contained,
mm-hmm.
but by the end of the movie, literally World War III is about to happen.
Yeah.
Like missiles are being launched into the air, everybody's about to fight each other, and the only reason that doesn't happen is because Max is like, I revoke my wish,
mm-hmm.
right? So literally World War III almost happened, and then everybody just, I guess, recants their wishes, and it's not that things go back to normal. That's what we thought, right?
Yeah.
Because things start exploding, and you're like, okay, I guess everything's just going back to normal. But then whenever like Max is hugging his son and stuff, there's still debris everywhere, and you're like, okay, so I guess I'm not really sure. Once again, back to the confusion
mm-hmm.
thing. I'm not really sure what happened. Like people obviously still remember what happened. Obviously, the one guy who Diana runs into later on doesn't remember, because he doesn't remember that he was like, I guess, possessed by Steve Trevor's spirit for a few days. So I don't know what's going on there, because this is set in 1984. Man of Steel came out in, I think, 2013? And in Man of Steel, Clark says that he's been on Earth for 33 years, which would mean that he landed in 1980. So that means there's like a 4-year-old Clark Kent at some point,
mm-hmm.
like on this universe, during this movie, mm-hmm. there is a 4-year-old Clark Kent somewhere during all of this happening, and there's presumably a little bit older Bruce Wayne somewhere making a wish,
mm-hmm.
like hopefully, did he wish that his parents came back to life? Because that's sad, because whenever he had to revoke his wish, I guess. Maybe that's why he's so brooding in the Batman vs. Superman movies. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But I was just confused, like, in the DC continuity, I was like, I was not expecting it to be this big of a movie.
Mm-hmm.
Because literally World War III almost happens. Like, that drastically changes everything. Mm-hmm. So you would think that going into, like, Man of Steel and stuff, they would be prepared for a person like Superman and aliens and stuff. Because, like, there's already this, I don't know. I was just confused
casually
there.
about it too. Whenever she was out in public, it wasn't like a surprising thing. Like she's in the mall swinging from things, and they're just like, "Oh, it's Wonder Woman."
Yeah, they're like, "Oh, cool."
It's casual, yeah.
Yeah, it suggests that she's been around for a while doing stuff like this, and so I was just very confused. And then when you get to Batman vs. Superman, Batman acts like he's never even seen her before.
Yeah.
You know, like Superman's like, "Is she with you?" And Batman's like, "I thought she was with you." And they have like this whole joke, and you're like, so y'all don't know? Like, Batman is supposed to be the world's greatest detective, and he doesn't know who this woman is.
Yeah.
But apparently she single-handedly stopped World War III from happening back in the 80s. So I would think that he would know this. And so I was just really confused about the continuity. And I guess they're just kind of doing their own thing now at this point, and they're really not worrying about continuity. Mm-hmm. It just was very odd to me. And so I don't know. I don't know what you had to think about that, because really, I guess you haven't seen. Yeah. You've seen Man of Steel and Batman vs. Superman, but that's about it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to drop that in there because that just, I was just thinking, and I was like, I don't know. If you can't tell, I'm actually more of a fanboy when it comes to the DC movies than I am Marvel. Even though I will admit the Marvel movies are typically better. Yeah. DC, I just like their characters more. I have read more DC comics. Superman, he's my dude. Yeah. And so that's why I want to spend a little more time on this. But do you have anything else to say about Wonder Woman 1984?
I think it was a pretty decent movie. I actually look forward to watching it again.
Mm-hmm.
I think I look forward to watching it a second time more than I did watching it the first time.
Yeah.
Because I think I want to put all the pieces together. It's
Mm-hmm.
like I want to understand
It's a challenge.
Yes, I'm like, I must watch it again.
Yeah.
So I look forward to watching it again, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So even though we talked about a lot of negatives, I do want to watch it again.
Yeah, and I think the reason why we talk about all the negatives once again is
Yeah.
because we were looking forward to it so much, and it's
Yeah.
because we appreciate the content, right? We're not just
Right.
criticizing it for the sake of just being like, oh, we hate this. I enjoyed the movie.
Mm-hmm.
I just wish I could have enjoyed it more, and like it's like once again, so much potential, just not the best execution.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of really good ideas there. I just wish they'd been done a little bit better,
Mm-hmm.
because then it could have been like an awesome movie.
Yeah.
I just can't say like it just didn't live up to the first one. The first Wonder Woman. Really solid movie.
Yeah,
Really,
it
really,
was.
really good movie.
It was.
But I do look forward to watching it again as well.
Mm-hmm.
I'll probably, like you said, I'll enjoy it more this next time. Just because, you know what to expect.
Yeah.
And now you can just go in without like setting these like unfair expectations for it. You're just going in to just enjoy the
Face
movie.
value. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it will be more enjoyable. And once again, that's the cool thing about having HBO Max. This is, I've got like 40 subscribers. I'm not sponsored or anything. But shameless plug for HBO Max, which literally we just got yesterday, so we could watch this movie.
Yeah.
And eventually the Snyder Cut and stuff. But I think it's really cool that you can do that. And Warner Brothers has decided to release all of their movies for the next year, both in theaters and on HBO Max.
Pretty cool.
So that's really cool. To where I love it. To where I love being in theaters and stuff. But it's so neat to be able to just like pause a movie and like rewind, and like there'd be times where I was like, what did they say there? And then we'd rewind it to just like rewatch it.
Yeah.
I think that's so cool.
Mm-hmm.
So and then if you have family over and they're being loud, you're like, hey, be quiet, and then you like rewind and rewatch it. So
Yeah.
that's kind of nice. But yeah, so let us know what you thought about Wonder Woman 1984. If you liked it, let us know. If you didn't like it, let us know. Let us know why.
Yeah.
And until then, Merry Christmas. I know it's not Christmas anymore, but hey, I'm still going to say Merry Christmas because I love Christmas.
Yes.
Merry Christmas. Happy New Year's. I'm David.
And I'm Brienne.
And this is Now Let's Be Honest About Movies. See y'all later.